Hello everyone, welcome back to the Little Goth Panda stream. So today it is True Crime Friday. And today we are covering the case of Edmund Kemper, also known as the co-ed killer. So this one is one I'm insanely interested in and really excited to cover because I have explained, I think, countless amount of times to a lot of people before that, in my opinion, Ed Kemper is probably one of the most intelligent serial killers ever. Well, one of the most, in terms of how he went about things and his planning. Which we're going to go into because not a lot of people believe me on this stuff, but with how clever and intelligent he is, it makes him just as scary. Hey, Silverback, how you doing? How are you today? About to say how you doing again. How are you today, Silverback? Y'all weird as heck. Hey, gay bottom simp. Don't we know it? Don't we know it, though? So today, we are covering the case of Edmund Kemper. We're going to go through his childhood. We're going to go through his first murders. We're going to go through his time in a psychiatric facility. And then we're also going to go through his crimes and the aftermath. Hey, Scarlett, how you doing? How is everyone today? How is your Friday going so far? I've got a beer with me. I've also got this. I found this in Lidl today. Just a bottle of passion fruit martini. It's like 4%, so it's literally like barely anything. It's literally nothing. But if you want something that's not a high percentage as a cocktail, there you go. Sunrise passion fruit martini. We're gonna give this a go at some point. But yeah, from Lidl for £2.50. Not bad. I'm okay, want to change my hair colour soon. What colour are we thinking? So, before we do dive into the nitty gritty thing with Ed Kemper, there has to be, as per usual on this stream, a quick disclaimer. So, this is a true crime stream. No one is glorifying these crimes or criminals. This stream is for historical and educational reasons and to remember the victims of these crimes. I do not mean to offend anyone with this stream. Any money donated during a true crime segment goes straight to charity that helps people who have been affected by crimes such as these. This stream may mention murder, violence, sexual assault, rape, and child abuse. This one in particular will 100% feature mentions of decapitation, necrophilia. Yeah. That some people may find upsetting and or triggering. So if at all you are affected by any of this, this may not be the stream for you. This is a warning right here, right now. There is also a trigger warning mention on the title, just to make you 100% clear. This is also just to also make sure for anyone who is going to be commenting in the chat during this segment, do need to pre-warn you that everything that gets recorded during a true crime stream is recorded for YouTube as a Twitch highlight and will get uploaded there later on. So just pre-warning, you don't want anything uploaded onto YouTube, please watch what you say. So yeah, we're gonna get right into the life of Edmund Kemper. 'Cause he's a character, to say the least. I've got the wrong tab, guys. Ah, yes, I'm getting famous on YouTube. Now, this one doesn't look to be as long as the Jeffrey Dahmer episode. Let's just class that as a... Goth isn't prepared. I'm actually prepared. I just opened up the wrong tab. So, to start this off, Edmund Kemper. Edmund Kemper is also known as the co-ed killer. All of his crimes took place in California, and like I have said before, he is 100% one of the most intelligent serial killers by the way he plans things and how he went about his crimes and how he came up with half the things that he did. Because this was all planned. It wasn't necessarily, I lost my shit one day and I just took it out on these women. It's more, I observed, I learnt, and I listened to people that had done similar, and I tried to do what they didn't do. Which is what makes him a billion times more scary, I guess. So, straight away with his childhood, Edmund Emil Kemper was born on the 18th of December 1948 in Burbank, California. His parents were Edmund Jr. and Clarnell Kemper, so Edmund Kemper was basically Ed Kemper III. Gay Bottom Sim, you are not homophobic. Please stop saying you are, because if people see this on any other platform, they're going to think that we have homophobes and we bring it on in this chat. Please don't start saying that. We are a very much friendly and LGBT stream, because half of us are part of the community anyway. So Edmund Jr. was a World War II veteran who, after the war, tested nuclear weapons in the Pacific Proving Grounds before returning to California, where he worked as an electrician. Clarnell often complained about Edmund's basically meaningless electrician job. He later said, "A suicide mission in wartime and the atomic bomb testings were nothing compared to living with her," and that Clarnell affected him more than 396 days and nights of fighting on the front did. You're talking about... Oh, I thought you were saying that you're a homophobic guy. Right, I was talking about the guy you're talking about. Ed Kemper, there isn't really anything on him being homophobic, to be fair. There actually isn't anything on there. So, Ed Kemper, well, one thing to notice about Ed Kemper is that he was a very big guy. He was tall as all hell. And he was also just a very big kid from the get-go. Because when he was born, he weighed at 13 pounds as a newborn. Poor Clarnell. Ed Kemper was a head taller than his own classmates by the age of 4. Early on, he exhibited antisocial behaviour, such as cruelty to animals. Take that off your bingo list, guys, because that's a key one. At the age of 10, he buried a cat alive. There you go. Once it died, he dug it up, decapitated it, mounted its head on a spike, and he later stated that he got pleasure from successfully lying to his family about killing the family cat. Lovely. Hey Bond, how you doing? Your favourite, love it. How are you today? Welcome to True Crime Fridays again. So at the age of 13, he killed another family cat when he perceived it to be favouring his younger sister, who was called Aileen Lee Kemper, over him, and he kept pieces of it in his closet until his mother found them. The dude was absolutely massive, which is what makes him even more terrifying. The fact that he's such a big guy, but he knows that he has all this intelligence. That's just twisted. Oh god, if you guys think this is twisted, wait till we get to the nitty-gritty shit. Kemper had a dark fantasy life, no shit. He performed rites with his younger sister's dolls that involved removing their heads and hands, and at one occasion when his sister Susan Huey Kemper teased him and asked him why he did this, his sister teased him and asked him why he did not try to kiss his teacher, sorry. So there's a whole thing where he had a crush on his teacher, like ridiculously stalking level. And his sister asked, why don't you kiss your teacher? Why don't you just give her like a kiss on the cheek kind of thing? And Ed replied with, if I kiss her, I'd have to kill her first. He also recalled that as a young boy, he would sneak out of his house and, armed with his father's gun, go to his second grade teacher's house to watch her through the windows. Peeping Tom, take that on off. He stated in later interviews that some of his favourite games to play as a child were gas chamber and electric chair, in which he asked his younger sister to tie him up and flip an imaginary switch, and he would then tumble over with her on the floor, pretending that he was being electrocuted or pretending that he was in a gas chamber. He also had a near-death experience as a child, once when his older sister tried to push him in front of a train, and another time when she successfully pushed him into the deep end of a swimming pool where he almost drowned. So, yeah. The guy ain't normal, to say the least, but then again, none of these guys are. He also had a close relationship with his father, so he hated his mother, had a terrible relationship with his mother from the time he was born up until the day she died. But his dad, he was very, very close to at a young age. Kemper had a close relationship with his father, and he was devastated when his parents separated in 1957. He may have been devastated. His dad may have been fucking relieved, causing him to be raised by Clarnell in Helena, Montana. He had severely dysfunctional relationship with his mother, a neurotic and domineering alcoholic who frequently belittled, humiliated, and abused him. Now, this has actually all been confirmed. She was a terrible mother. I mean, don't blame her for the reason why you've done all this shit, because many people have had those kind of mothers, and believe me, they don't go out killing people. Don't use her as an excuse, but she was a cunt. So, Clarnell often made her son sleep. Now, this one's a bit weird, because this should have been, let me go ring the police now, because you clearly are a dodgy bloke. So she often made him sleep in a locked basement. Now, she only did this because she feared that he would rape or abuse his sisters, who frequently mocked him for his large size. If you think your kid's gonna do that, maybe you should just ring someone and, get him out of there. By the age of 15, he stood at 6 feet and 4 inches in height. And he was called a real weirdo by his sister. She also, and his mother. His mother refused to show him affection out of fear that she would turn him gay. So his mother was homophobic. And she also told him on the occasion that he reminded her of his father and that no woman would ever love him. Ed Kemper later described her as a sick, angry woman, and it had been kind of put out there that she might have suffered from borderline personality disorder. At the age of 14, he ran away from his home in an attempt to rekindle his relationship with his father in Van Nuys, California. Once there, he learned that his father had remarried and had a stepson. He stayed with his father and his new family for a short while until his dad sent him to live with his paternal grandparents, aka his parents, who lived on a ranch in the mountains of Norfolk, Carolina. Kemper hated living in Norfolk. He described his grandfather as senile and said that his grandmother was constantly emasculating me and my grandfather. No women will ever love you. No shit, I love it. So we're going to get on to the first murders. Oh shit, sorry. So the first murders. Let me go move me butt here. On the 27th of August, 1964, at the age of 15, Ed Kemper was sitting at the kitchen table with his grandmother, Maud Matilda Huey Kemper, when they had an argument. Kemper's temper rose and he stormed off to go grab a rifle that his grandfather had given him for hunting. The rifle had actually been confiscated by his grandmother because she said that he couldn't be trusted with it, also because he kept using it to shoot the animals when they clearly didn't need shooting. He then re-entered the kitchen and fatally shot his grandmother in the head before firing two more into her back. His grandmother's last words were, "Oh, you'd better not be shooting the birds again," when he walked in with the gun. Now, also, when she hid the gun, he found out that she hid the gun and got really angry that she'd done this. If you weren't looking for the gun, how did you know that she'd confiscated and hid it somewhere, dude? Some accounts mention that she also suffered multiple post-mortem stab wounds with a kitchen knife. Wouldn't put it past him. Kemper's grandfather, Edmund Kemper I, returned from grocery shopping. Kemper went outside and fatally shot him in the driveway next to his car. He was unsure of what to do next, so he phoned his mother, that he hates so much, who told him to contact the police and give himself up. So he did just that. He rang the police and waited to be taken into custody. He literally sat on the porch steps and waited on the porch steps. After his arrest, Kemper said that he just wanted to see what it felt like to kill Grandma, and testified that he killed his grandfather so he wouldn't have to find out that his wife was dead. and that he would be angry with Kemper for what he'd done. No shit, Sherlock. Psychiatrist Donald Lude, who interviewed Kemper during his adulthood, wrote, "In his way, he had avenged the rejection of both his father and his mother. Kemper's crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him as a paranoid schizophrenic, then sent him to this is going to take me a while. Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility that houses mentally ill criminals." So at the facility in California, youth attorney, psychiatrists, and social workers disagreed with the court psychiatrist's diagnosis of a paranoid schizophrenic. Their report stated that Kemper showed no flight of ideas, no interference with thought, no expression of delusions or hallucinations, and no evidence of bizarre thinking, which, to be fair, would not make him a paranoid schizophrenic if he doesn't have these symptoms already. They also observed him to be intelligent. He had actually been tested for his IQ, and his IQ came out at 136, which is just over which is way over the standard for his age at the time. Dude's so intelligent, it's terrifying. He was re-diagnosed with a less severe condition, a personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. Later on his time in the facility, Kemper was given another IQ test, which gave him a higher result of 145, which is insane. He then endeared himself to his psychiatrist by being a model prisoner and was trained to administer psychiatric tests to other inmates. So, he behaved himself so well in this facility and got on so well with the nurses and other psychiatrists there that they actually let him sit in on other patients' meetings, basically. They let him have access to different patients' files and just let him sit in and talk to various different patients. Now, the people within this facility that were in prison there were people who had raped, murdered, they had done probably some of the worst crimes imaginable, and he was allowed to sit in on their meetings and listen to every single thing that they said, which most of the time included what they did, how they did it, and how they got caught, which led Kemper to bring up into his mind how not to get caught. They shouldn't have done that. Yeah, they shouldn't have. He looked at people with normal IQ as things being manipulated. Exactly. It's basically what he did. He also sat down in just private sessions with these prisoners and actually asked them, what could you have done differently to not get caught if you had to go back and do those crimes again? And a lot of them said, don't leave any witnesses. Take them to secluded areas. I didn't do that. There were people watching. Make sure all witnesses have been killed. All this kind of stuff. One of the psychiatrists actually later said that he was a very good worker, and this is not typical of a sociopath. He took pride in his work. He also became a member of the JCs while in the facility. They said he developed some new rests and some new skills on the Minnesota Basic Personality Inventory. After his second arrest, Kemper said that being able to understand how these tests function allowed him to manipulate his psychiatrist, and admitted that he learned a lot from the sex offenders to who he administered tests. For example, they told him that to avoid leaving witnesses, it was best to kill a woman after raping her. He also, by looking at some of these prisoners, so obviously some of these prisoners actually did end up getting released when they were deemed as sane and got put into the care of people that would actually be able to make sure they wouldn't reoffend. Now, he also got to see these patients as well, which means he also analyzed them, which means he also managed to teach himself how to look and act sane. So, before you knew it, He got put in there at 15, and just 6 years later, on the 18th of December 1969, Ed Kemper was released on parole from the facility. Now, against the recommendations of the psychiatrist at the hospital, he was released into the care of his mother, Clarnell. So, the psychiatrist told the police, do not release him into the care of his mother. She is the key to all his problems, and this would just make matters worse. The police released him into the care of his mother. So, ignored everything that was meant to have happened. At the time, she had remarried and taken the surname Strandberg, and then she divorced again. At 609 Aord Street in California, a short drive from where she worked as an administrative assistant at the University of California in Santa Cruz, Kemper later demonstrated further to a psychiatrist that he was rehabilitated, and on the 29th of November 1972, his juvenile records were permanently expunged, meaning that the murders of his two grandparents that he did when he was 15 were taken off record. So, police officers could look into his file and pretty much see nothing. Because there wouldn't be anything there. They wiped his records. He no longer had it written down in his file that he had murdered two people a few years back. Which would have solved so much shit. So while staying with his mother, Kemper attended a community college in accordance with his parole requirements, and he had hoped that he would become a police officer, although he was rejected from the police force because of his size. So, because at the time from his release at the facility, he stood 6'9", which led him to his nickname, Big Ed. Still think of Big Ed, and I think of 90 Day Fiancé, but okay. So he maintained relationships with the Santa Cruz police officers despite his rejection to join the police force, and he became a self-described friendly nuisance at the bar called the Jury Room, which was a popular bar for all the police officers to hang out at. So what made this even worse is that when he went on to do his crimes, he would still go to the jury room and sit with the police officers in there, and they would be talking about the crime in a way and saying that they haven't caught this guy and all this kind of stuff. So he'd hang out with these police officers and actually know that he is still getting away with all his crimes, and also he'd know what to change if he ever needed to. When I say he's intelligent, I mean he's intelligent, but he's scary intelligent. He worked a series of smaller jobs before gaining employment with the State of California Division of Highways. During this time, his relationship with his mother remained toxic and hostile. The two of them constantly had arguments that their neighbors often overheard. He later described the arguments he had with his mother around the time, stating the following. He said, "My mother and I started right in on horrendous battles, just horrible battles, violent and vicious. I've never been in such a vicious verbal battle with anyone. I would go into fists with a man, but this was my mother, and I couldn't stand the thought of my mother and I doing these things. She insisted on it, and just over stupid things. I remember one roof raiser was over whether I should have my teeth cleaned. Yes, have your teeth cleaned. Also, don't say that you wouldn't punch your mother in the face, dude, because you literally ripped off her head and fucked it. So don't even... Spoiler, that will come up. Exactly. We'll get to that. So when he had saved up enough money, he moved out to live with a friend in Alameda, California. That's definitely not how you say it, but fuck it. There he still complained about being unable to get away from his mother because she regularly phoned him and paid him surprise visits. All parents do that, by the way. He had often had financial difficulties, which resulted in him frequently returning to his mother's apartment in Aptos at Santa Cruz Beach. That was blunt. That is my way of talking about Ed Kemper. Hey Milk, how you doing? Welcome to True Crime Friday. So, when he was at Santa Cruz Beach, he met a student from Turlock High School who he became engaged to in March 1973. The engagement was broken off after Kemper's second arrest, and his fiance's parents requested her name not be revealed to the public. Fair enough. The same year that he began working for the Highway Division, he was hit by a car while riding a motorcycle that he had recently bought. His arm was badly injured in the crash, and he received a $15,000 settlement in the civil suit he filed against the car's driver. As he was driving around in the 1969 Ford Galaxy he bought with half his settlement money, he noticed a large number of young women hitchhiking and then he began creating his murder box. I'm doing good, Milk. I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. Oh no! Right, so we've got to make this one extra good then. So he began creating a murder box that he'd keep in his car, which included plastic bags, knives, blankets, and handcuffs in his car. He then began picking up young women and peacefully letting them go. So he started off by actually just giving them a ride. According to Edmund Kemper, he picked up around 150 hitchhikers before he felt homicidal urges, which he called his little zapples, and began acting on them. Love you, Milk. So now, guys, we're going to be getting into the murders, okay? So in between May 1972 and April 1973, Ed Kemper killed 8 people. He would pick up female students who were hitchhiking and take them to isolated areas where he would shoot, stab, smother or strangle them. He would then take their bodies back to his home where he decapitated them, performed oral sex on their severed heads, and raped their bodies and then dismembered them. So pre-warning. So, the first victim, well, technically the third and fourth victims of Ed Kemper's are Marianne Peace and Anita Lucetta. Marianne was born on the 19th of August 1953 in New York City. She was 18 years old when she met Kemper, and Anita was born on the 29th of October 1953 in Stachylus County, California, and she was also 18 years old at the time. So on the 7th of May 1972, Kemper was driving in Berkeley, California, when he picked up the two 18-year-olds from Fresno State University with the intention of driving them to Stanford University. After driving for around about an hour, he managed to reach a secluded wooded area near Alameda, California, in an area that he was familiar with from his work at the Highway Department. Without alerting his passengers that he changed directions from where they wanted to go, he did this weird thing where he would be but basically just try and distract them the entire way there, just be like, oh, look over there, that kind of bullshit. So it was when they got to the area, he handcuffed Mary and locked Anita in the boot. He then stabbed and strangled Mary to death and then killed Anita in the exact same way. He then later confessed that while handcuffing Mary, he brushed the back of his hand against one of her breasts and embarrassed him, adding after he confessed to this that he said, "Whoops, I'm sorry," or something like that, despite murdering her literally a few minutes later. He put both of the women's bodies in the boot of his Ford Galaxy and returned to his apartment. He was stopped on the way by a police officer for having a broken tail light, but the officer did not detect the bodies in the car. His roommate was not home when he got back, so when he took the bodies into his apartment, he photographed them and raped the bodies before dismembering them. He then put the body parts into plastic bags, which he later abandoned near Loma Pietra Mountain, before disposing of Mary and Anita's severed heads in a ravine. Kemper engaged in oral sex with both of their severed heads, and in August of that year, Mary's skull was found on Loma Pietra Mountain, and an extensive search failed to turn up the rest of her remains or any of Anita's. So I want you guys to just Look right here. This is Mary and Anita right here. Just remember them for a split sec, because most people don't actually remember what these people look like, and they really need to. So if we're going to the next victim, we are going into Aiko Ku. Aiko was born on the 25th of May 1957 in San Francisco County in California. She was 15 years old when she came into contact with Edmund Kemper. So on the evening of the 4th of September 1972, he picked up the 15-year-old dance student who decided to hitchhike to a dance after missing her bus. He again drove to a remote area where he pulled a gun on her before accidentally locking himself out of his car. However, she let him back inside the car, despite the fact that the gun was still with her. Back inside the car, he carried on to choke her until she was unconscious. He then raped her and then killed her. He packed her body into the boot of his car and went to a nearby bar to have a few drinks. And while he was in the bar, he kept going out of the bar to go and open the boot and just stare at her for a few minutes and then go back in, have another drink, go back out, stare, have another drink, and kind of went in this weird pattern. So back at his apartment, he raped her body and then dismembered and disposed of the remains in a similar manner to his last two victims. Her mother called the police to report the disappearance of her daughter and put up hundreds of flyers asking for information, but she didn't get any response about her daughter's location at all or whether she was dead or alive. So yeah, this is Aiko Ku. Just want you guys to remember what she looks like right here. Very beautiful young girl, and was unfortunately only 15 years old when she sadly passed away due to the actions of Edmund Kemper. Our next victim is Cindy Shaw. Cindy was born on the 4th of August 1954 in San Mateo County, California. She was 18 years old, like most of the other victims when she met Edmund Kemper. On the 7th of January 1973, Kemper, who had moved back in with his mother at the time due to financial difficulties, was driving around the Calabrio College campus when he picked up the 18-year-old student. He drove to a wooded area and fatally shot her with a .22 caliber pistol. He then placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove back to his mother's house, where he kept her body hidden in a closet in his room overnight. When his mother left for work the next morning, he raped Cindy's body and removed the bullet from her. Then he dismembered her and decapitated her in his mother's bathtub. Now, one thing that he did that he's very specific about is when he disposed of her, he kept her severed head for several days, using it for oral sex. He then buried it in his mother's garden, facing upward towards her bedroom. After his arrest, he stated that he did this because his mother always wanted people to look up to her. It's terrifying, yeah. It's horrible. He then got rid of the rest of her remains by throwing them off a cliff. And over the course of the following few weeks, all except for her head and right hand were discovered and pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle. A pathologist determined that Cindy had been cut into pieces with a power saw, which probably answers your question about, well, no, just basically carries on what you were saying, Silverback. His next victims are Rosalind Thorpe and Alison Liu. Rosalind Thorpe was born on the 30th of September 1949 in Los Angeles County, California, making her 23 years old, and Alison Liu was born on the 8th of February 1952 in Los Angeles County, making her 20 years old. On the 5th of February 1973, after a heated argument with his mother, Ed Kemper left his house in search of a possible victim. With heightened suspicion of a serial killer preying on hitchhikers in the Santa Cruz area, students at the time were advised to accept rides only from cars with university stickers on them. Kemper managed to get this sticker because his mother actually worked at the university, like I'd mentioned before. She'd already worked there, so he had easy access to a sticker. And also, anyone could have access to those stickers. Even if he wasn't the killer. Like, anyone else probably had access to these stickers. So, yeah, he encountered the 23-year-old and 20-year-old at the UCSC campus. According to Kemper, Rosalind got into his car first, which then reassured Allison a bit later on in the drive to also get into the car because she saw another girl in there and she thought, he's not going to kill 2 people in one night, right? Unfortunately, some of them do. He first fatally shot Rosalind and then Allison with his .22 caliber pistol and wrapped their bodies in blankets. Kemper again brought his victims back to his mother's house. This time he beheaded them in his car and carried the headless bodies into his mother's house to rape them. Now the thing is, when he beheaded the bodies in the car, he did this right in front of his neighbor's house. And he said he got this weird thrill from it because he knew that if they just would have looked down and out their windows, this would have all been over. He would have been caught straight away. So yeah, he then dismembered the bodies, removed the bullets to prevent identification. He then discarded their remains the next morning. Some remains were found at Eden Canyon a week later, and more were found near Highway 1 in March of that year. When questioned in an interview as to why he decapitated his victims, he explained, "The head trip fantasies were a bit like a trophy, you know? The head is where everything is at. The brain, the eyes, and mouth. That's the person I remember being told as a kid, you cut off the head and the body dies. The body is nothing after the head is cut off. Well, that's not quite true. There's a lot left in the girl's body without the head." Think you know what he means. So yeah, this obviously you've got Rosalind Thorpe and Allison Hugh right here. Please look at their faces. Please remember them. This is the reason why I do sometimes actually show pictures of the victims, if I can get hold of the pictures, so we can look at them, remember them, because they deserve their memory living on. So we're going into our final murders now. First one being Clarnell Strandberg. Clarnell Strandberg was known formally as Clarnell Kemper, and she was Edmund Kemper's mother. She was born on the 17th of March 1921 in Winnett, Petroleum County, Montana, making her 52 at the time. She was labeled as a violent alcoholic who would constantly belittle and humiliate Edmund Kemper. The next victim, who I'll show up when we talk about her death, is Sally Hallett. She was Clarnell's only friend, who was probably the only person Clarnell was actually nice to, considering all other witness accounts described her as a bad person. But there were rumours that even Kemper believed himself that his mother and Sally were more than friends. So on the 20th of April 1973, after coming home from a party, 52-year-old Clarnell Elizabeth Strandberg woke Kemper up when she came home. While she was sat in her bed reading a book, she noticed Ed enter her room and said to him, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up and talk all night now." And he just went, "No, good night." He then waited for her to fall asleep, and then Okay, so before I definitely go into this one is dark as all hell. This one is the one that he had been wanting to do for a long time. This is the big one that he wanted to do. So, warning on this one, right? So he waited for her to fall asleep. He then snuck back into her room and bludgeoned her with a claw hammer and then slit her throat with a penknife. He then decapitated her and engaged in oral sex with her severed head, and then used it as a dartboard. He stated that he put her head on a shelf and screamed at it for an hour. He threw darts at it and then smashed her face in. He also cut out her tongue and vocal cords and put them in the garbage disposal. However, the garbage disposal would not break down the tough vocal cords, and ejected the tissue back into the sink and actually spat blood all over him. which apparently he found funny and laughed at it. He said that it seemed appropriate as much as she'd bitched and screamed and yelled at me over so many years. Basically, yeah. He then hid his mother's body in a closet and went to have a drink at a nearby bar. Of course he did. When he got back, he invited his mother's best friend, 59-year-old Sarah Taylor, aka Sally Hallett. So he invited her over to the house to have dinner and watch a movie. His mother and Sally had gone away. When Sally arrived, Kemper strangled her to death to create a cover story that his mother and Sally had gone away together on a vacation. He put Sally's body in a closet and obscured any outward signs of a disturbance, and then left a note for the police when they'd eventually find the bodies. He wrote, approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I've got things to do. And that was the note he left. So, after he wrote the note, he fled the scene. He drove non-stop to Pueblo, Colorado, taking caffeine pills to stay awake for the over 1,000-mile journey. He had 3 guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition in his car, and he believed that he was going to be the target of an active manhunt. But after not hearing any news on the radio about the murders of his mother and Sally, when he arrived in Pueblo, he found a phone booth and called the police. Now, weird thing is, because he's such good mates with the police, he confessed to the murders of his mother and Sally, but the police didn't take his call seriously and told him to call back later because they thought he was joking. Then what did he do? He called back later. He called back later. So several hours later, he called again, asking to speak to an officer that he knew personally, mostly from their times in the bar. He confessed to the officer of killing his mother and Sally, and then waited for the police to arrive and take him into custody, where he also confessed to the murders of the 6 students. When asked in a later interview why he turned himself in, Kemper said the original purpose was gone. It wasn't serving any physical or real or emotional purpose. It was just a pure waste of time. Emotionally, I couldn't handle it much longer. Toward the end there, I started feeling the folly of the whole damn thing. And at the point of near exhaustion, near collapse, and I just wanted the hell with it and called it all off. Yeah, man, you're a great guy. You eventually called it off. You killed about 8 people though. Woohoo! This is watermelon juice, by the way. Not a cocktail yet. So, Edmund Kemper was then arrested for all of his crimes. He was arrested on 8 counts of first-degree murder on the 7th of May 1973. He was assigned the chief police defender. He was assigned the chief public defender of Santa Cruz County, Attorney Jim Jackson. Due to Kemper's explicit and detailed confession, his counselor's only option was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity to the charges. Kemper twice tried to commit suicide in custody, and his trial went ahead on the 23rd of October 1973. Let me have a drink. You could probably hear me swallowing that, Jesus. Apologies. So, 3 court-appointed psychiatrists found Kemper to be legally sane. Of course he is. He knows what the fuck he was doing. One of the psychiatrists, Dr. Joel Fort, investigated his juvenile records and the diagnosis that he was once psychotic. Fort also interviewed Kemper, including under truth serum. Sounds like something from Harry Potter, because there was also a truth serum in that. And related to the court that Kemper had engaged in cannibalism, alleging that he sliced flesh off from the legs of his victims, then cooked and consumed these strips of flesh in a casserole. Nevertheless, Fort determined that Kemper was fully consistent in each case and stated that Kemper enjoyed the prospect of the infamy associated with being labelled a murderer. Kemper later recanted the confession of cannibalism. California used the negating standard, which held that for a defendant to establish a defense on the ground of insanity, it must be clearly proved that at the time of the committing of the act, the party accused was labouring under such a defect of reason from disease of mind and not to know the nature and quality of the act he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know he was doing what was wrong. Kemper appeared to have known that the nature of his acts were wrong, and he had shown signs of malice afterthought. On the 1st of November, Kemper took the stand. He testified that he killed the victims because he wanted them for myself like possessions, and attempted to convince the jury that he was insane based on that reasoning, and that his actions could have been committed only by someone with an aberrant mind. He said that two beings inhabited his body and that when the killer personality took over, it was kind of like blacking out. So on the 8th of November 1973, the 6-man, 6-woman jury deliberated for 5 hours before declaring Kemper sane and guilty on all accounts. Obviously, you all know that if you do get the insanity plea, then you don't really get sent to prison, you get put into a psychiatric hospital, which is a lot more pleasant. He asked for the death penalty, requesting death by torture, which don't give him because he clearly wanted that when he was a kid, when he was practicing it as games. However, with a ultimatum placed on capital punishment by the Supreme Court of California, he instead received 7 years to life for each count, with these terms to be served concurrently, and was sentenced to the California Medical Facility. And that is Ed Kemper, and I'm pretty sure he is still there currently, because he's still actually alive, so lovely. He's still there currently. He's not left that place once. So yeah, I think he is still there right now. Yep. He's still there. He's still alive. I mean, he's currently 72, so he probably don't have long left before he pops his clogs. But yeah, now that was the case of Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer. Let me put something a little bit nicer on, because that was the case of Edmund Kemper, also known as the co-ed killer. Thank you everyone for watching this week's True Crime Friday. It's been an interesting one to say the least, and if you have any thoughts about Edmund Kemper, or you want to ask any questions that I might have missed, and you want to know anything else, please let me know in the chat. If you are staying on the Twitch stream, if you want to stay here and talk to me even further, you can do by all means and ask me any questions. We're going to chill, we're going to play some games, we're going to hang out for a bit. But if you are on YouTube and you are wanting to ask me some questions about this kind of stuff, feel free to do so in the comments down below. And for YouTube, I'll see you next week when we talk about Peter Tobin. And for the stream, we're going to carry on.